Hi, I'm Cindy Solomon. Welcome. Thanks for being here tonight. This is in case you don't know where you are, this is the StartUP ProductTalks San Francisco Meetup. This is our third time we're meeting here at Atlassian, so thank you very much to Atlassian for providing the space and the gear. And Nick, our host, he'll come in and maybe say a few words. So I started this meetup over a year ago because I needed to have a product management community in San Francisco. It just got annoying. There's a big community down in Santa Clara, the Silicon Valley Product Management Association. It's been around for 5 or 6 years. There is the Silicon Valley Product Camp that happens once a year. It's an all-day event where product people come together, and it's an unconference. And I just needed to have a monthly event here in San Francisco. And I have this idea that there are people who are product people, and they may not be product managers, but they care about the integrity of the product. They care about the product lifecycle process. They're touching the product in various ways that it would really help them if they had a foundation in understanding some methodologies, and that there is actually a discipline. There is some traditions there are best practices. There's certainly thought leaders who have been speaking about teaching and doing product management in San Francisco and in startups for a while. So I run a weekly podcast, the Global Product Management Talk. Weekly, I have a thought leader who talks about a specific subject. There's about 50 podcasts out on iTunes. I made a little Android app so you can listen to it. Apple didn't take it yet, or Windows, but I need to do another iteration to get them in there. I also have a vast network of product managers worldwide. From Australia to England to London. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll hook you up. The AIPMM is the Association of International Product Management and Marketing. They've been around for 14 years, and they're now really forwarding the profession of product management and working to develop a product management body of knowledge. They actually looked at what is missing to be considered a profession, and it's really, companies are really scrambling. As I've spoken to a number of people, it's not a new thing, that there's no standards, there's no agreement on what a product manager is, how you hire a product manager. We might know what that is, but companies don't know that. So the AIPMM is really working hard to fill in the gaps, to make this considered an actual profession. So I'm bringing some trainings that they have developed from people working in the field. One is creating successful products. It's an all-day event. If you're a member of this meetup, there's a $100 discount. Talk to me about it. And there's a 2-day event called Product Innovation Leadership. It's really a rigorous course. You can get a certification afterwards, and it's really geared to people who are working in product management, project management, people who are tasked with handling products within their companies, but really need some hands-on experience and guidance. So ask me about it. I can talk at length about those. I have a lot of ideas of what can help this community or what we can do and where I want to see. I think San Francisco should be the place where we rise up as product professionals and say, okay, people, this is how it should be. Enough with these tech-driven companies. The product people should be driving these products. So that's really my hidden agenda, not so hidden. So I'm just ecstatic to have you guys show up, and I know a lot of people in the Valley that I respect. I'm ecstatic to invite them to come speak. Dan Olsen is one of them. He's he's an entrepreneur. He's a StartUP VP of Product. He can speak at length on any subject that we want to talk about, from the pains of product management to to starting up, to bootstrapping, et cetera, et cetera. I'll turn it over to you in a second. Nick, though, we thanked you when you were out of the room. Do you want to say something right now?
Thanks for joining us at the product management of this evening. Welcome on behalf of Atlassian. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Great. If you're tweeting, I run a weekly Twitter chat called Prod Management Talk. I'll put the hashtag up there. If you use the hashtag, I'll capture the tweets when I pull together a transcript of this event. Lots of people have asked us to film, to live stream. Someone here offered to when we go forward, we're going to get together with you to film and host it on your startup platform. So every month we're getting better. And really, I'm hoping that if any of you are looking for a job, let's add that. I want to put up actually an agenda. I want there to be time for whoever's looking, and if there's anyone who has open recs, that you can give a 1 minute about it. Number one, thank you. That's the hashtag. Number two, I'd like to have an all-day event where we had an unconference and people could present from their experience doing product management. Where basically we did this and we voted on conferences. They're called product camps. They happen all over the country. There'll be one here in San Francisco in October. I would like to see one focused on startup product. So speak to me about that. Hook up with my weekly chat and connect with me. I'm going to turn it over to Dan to take a pulse of the room and take it from there.
Cool. Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dan Olsen. It's a pleasure to talk to you guys today. Thanks to Atlassian for hosting us. A lot of people I work with use Jira and all their other products. They're great products, so we appreciate you guys contributing to the product management community here. And kudos, Cindy, for building a group up here. We do in the Valley. We have the SVPMA, and we have some groups, but like in the Valley, whether it's a PHP group or JavaScript meetup, there's like one in the Valley and one in the city. So it's great that we're getting one in the city because there's definitely plenty of product managers up here. So what I actually want to do is practice what I preach and be a product manager and just learn more about my customers, which are you guys, before I talk. Because like Cindy said, I have tons of material on the Meetup. There's a SlideShare link that I put all my talks up there. And I love most talking to groups like this where it's all product managers. Sometimes I'll talk at Web 2.0 Expo. It'll be a mix of PMs, engineers, designers, business people. So product camp and like this is pretty much the main times where I can talk to just PMs. So we can really get into the nitty-gritty details. So first off, why don't we start? How many people are actually working in product management right now? Just raise your hand. This is going to be raise your hand survey, real-time quantitative data. Okay. Anyone not a PM? Okay, cool. What do you got? Just yell at, if you're not a PM, what do you do?
Project management.
Project management. Okay. Engineer. Welcome. Project.
Business development.
Business development. Okay, cool. Cool. So yeah, great. Okay. And then how many people are actually working? Why don't we just do it the other way? How many people are actually looking for a new job in PM, whether it's entering it or changing jobs or something like that? Okay. How many people are trying to get into it for the first time? A couple people. Okay, great. Let's just do experience. How many people have been doing it 20 years or higher, more? Me too. We're the young but wise people. Okay, how about 15 or more? 10 or more? Okay, 5 or more? Okay, less than 5? Excellent, that makes, okay. Well, so it's more mainly young, less than 5, it seems like, less than 10. Cool, so I'll tailor it more towards that. And then how about B2C? How many people are in B2C, business, consumer-facing products versus B2B enterprise products? Okay, about even mix. Cool. And the last thing is just stage. How many people here are like really early stage pre-funding startups? One guy. How about early stage startup? Got some money. Okay. Late stage startup? Big company? Well, we got more big company people. All right. Atlassian's a mature company, I see. Okay, cool. All right, cool. Well, that's great. So then that helps me understand what's going on. The top thing is just to flip it around to you guys now and say, what are the top things you want to learn? And we can't really do this in a super efficient way. But if some people start telling me what they want concisely, we may be able to pattern match quickly. And I definitely have some prepared stuff to talk about. But what do people want to talk about? Who's got it? What's the top burning thing you want to learn tonight? A couple people put some stuff up here.
So a recurring thing that I've heard inside conversations is about the tech-driven startups. Are there any other kind of startups?
Sure.
But the problems that come with being a PM
Sure.
when the developers are driving the product.
Sure. How many people, let me abstract it out, how many people want to talk about like organizational issues as far as working with other teams and getting buy-in and being empowered? That's how I would kind of summarize that. How many people want to talk about that? A few. Okay. Being empowered. Okay. Great. What else do people have? What are the top questions?
How would you say no?
Say no.
Yeah.
Great.
I'd like to hear your definition.
Product manager? Cool. I put slides in just for that. So I was talking to people.
Yeah.
0, 1, and 2 years. Definition of PM. And that's what's funny is, even when we did this little thing, like, I'm a project manager, I'm a project manager. Sometimes you could be in a company and your title's project manager, but you're doing product management. It's like the names are completely freaking shifted around. I have a slide on that. Okay? And I have that really done.
So then the issue with unicorn hiring is a common issue, but I'm actually hearing more pain than I've heard recently, and it's not reflected in the media. The media is just saying, come to San Francisco, you'll get hired. Leaving out only if you're a developer.
Okay, why don't we talk about the skill set required to be a marketable PM? Is that what we're talking about?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Because it has changed, and actually it's cool. One person came up to me beforehand and talked about, hey, I'm getting back into, I was consulting, I'm getting back into roles, and they're expecting this from me, and I've never had it. 10 years ago, that was never on the radar.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So, okay. Yeah, okay, cool.
So is that kind of like how you manage yourself as a product?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Yeah, basically, yeah. What's your priority?
Does dealing with strong founders fit into tech-driven startups?
I think that's kind of probably part of this. Yeah, it's part of being empowered. And someone else said my biggest issue is executives. So dealing with execs and founders, sure. I'm sure that's not a problem last year. I'm sure. Yeah, what else we got? Yes?
Could you touch on the issue of quality control?
Sure. If you have a startup, you just don't even worry about it.
You mean quality control of the
PM QAs.
Okay, as opposed to quality control of the product manager.
Exactly.
Does customer interviews belong here?
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about it. I have slides on
Yeah.
that. Okay, cool. Okay, maybe one more. You better get it out now or else I'm not going to talk about it.
So, I'm interested in how you go from the structure where you go from business goals to features of what you do.
Hey, you guys are writing my
business
slides for me. Awesome.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, great. Okay, let's stop it there and start talking about stuff because I think most of this is in there. And we can definitely circle at the back. You can feel free to stop me with questions as I talk, and we can talk at the end. Circle back. And I think nominally it was supposed to be an hour, and I know we started late, but I'm happy to go a little bit over if people want. So.
I just want to interject. Could someone take notes and send them to me afterwards? And could someone be a timekeeper to just mention a time?
Sure. Yeah, I got my time.
Or just
Yeah,
call out when we're on the hour so we can gauge
Yeah, sure.
how much for Greg.
Sounds good. Okay, cool. So I learned about you guys, just to tell you a little bit about me. I'm a double E electrical engineer by training, undergrad. And I basically, after college, I worked in the Navy managing submarine design. So at the time, my title was lead engineer, but now having worked in product management, I was just a super, super technical product manager is what I was. We were making sure like the parts of the submarine, what were the requirements for this part, this system, and how did it interface with other parts and all that jazz. The Navy paid for a master's in industrial engineering. When my 5 years in the Navy were up, because they paid for my college, I came out here to go business school. I went to business school at Stanford. After Stanford Business School, when I was graduating, since I hadn't worked in product management, I just asked everybody I knew in the Valley, what's the best place to go to learn product management for consumer software and web? And everyone said, hands down at the time, Intuit. So I went to Intuit. Joined the Quicken team as a product manager, got promoted, and led that team. And then also launched an online brokerage there. I was there for 5 years total. Then I went to, I basically was ready. I learned what I wanted to learn there. It was really like a post-MBA in marketing and product management. It was awesome. Got to do all kinds of great stuff, lots of responsibility. I was ready to basically go to the startup world. So I went to Friendster as head of product management. And then after Friendster, I was like, okay, and I also, right before Friendster, I helped a friend in Madrid with a consumer-facing web startup too. So after Friendster, I was like, this is my third web thing that I've worked on, web product. I'm a technical guy, so I went and took the time to learn like PHP, MySQL, CSS, JavaScript, all that jazz. And then I was ready to do my own startup, but I didn't have an idea I was passionate about. So I stumbled into what I do now, which is basically PM consulting. And the best way to describe what I do is basically an interim VP of product for startups, like basically usually post-Series A startups. I've done that for Box.net, YouSendIt, Epocrates, a bunch of other companies. And then finally in 2007, I had an idea I was passionate about, your version, which was basically bringing personalized news aggregation recommendations to you. I basically bootstrapped it for several years. We launched at TechCrunch 50, won the People's Choice Award. We launched on the web, the iPhone, the iPad, Android phone, Android tablet. Raised a little seed round, but we didn't get the huge hockey stick of millions of customers that you need in the consumer space to monetize. So I switched back to doing consulting again, which is what I'm doing now, and really enjoying it. It's a lot of fun. So that's my background. I will post slides to SlideShare. I have a lot of talks up there already. Okay, so someone said definition of product management. So here it is. What is product management? So the first thing is you can't get tripped up by the labels. So a product manager by any other name would smell as sweet. Sometimes you're called a product marketing manager, sometimes it's a program manager, sometimes it's a project manager. It can vary whether you're in B2B or B2C or what stage you're in. And so the best way to think about product management is like an area of responsibility versus a job title. It's like who's doing these things, who's worried about these things, who's thinking about these things. In a startup, it may be the CEO. So the other way to think about it is who's wearing that hat, like who's wearing the hat that's dealing with these things and thinking about these things. So so you just can't get tripped up on that when you see job descriptions or people say, I do this, I do this. Program manager is another one. Usually only see that at big companies. But to sum it up, my definition is you basically sit between the market, which is the customers, prospective customers, competitors, and the development team. And your job is to make sure that what those guys build is going to deliver customer value and win in the marketplace. So that's how I define it at a high level. To get a little more granular, someone said, how do you translate business goals into product stuff? This is how I like to think about it. Kind of, you got your long-term strategies, and everything should start with business strategies and business objectives, and they inform your shorter-term business objectives, which inform your product objectives, right? So this is just kind of saying, hey, we're not just tactical, we're taking a step back and thinking about what do we need to do in the long term, and the business stuff informs the product stuff. Then basically, you get into product development. You market or sell the product, you service and support the product, and then there's a feedback loop, right? And so product management, and a lot of times you hear people talk about, I do inbound product marketing, or I do inbound product management versus outbound. Inbound's job is to sit here. It's to basically, again, you're sitting, the business strategy and objectives are informing what you're doing. You're coming up with these, and your interface point is with product development. Product marketing's job is great. Now we've built the product, we're going to go market and sell it. And our job is more what's called outbound product marketing. So usually when you are in a bigger company and they have distinct roles, that's how they divide the roles. I guess the other piece of it is if you get big enough, you can do project management, where product management is focused on defining the features, but they don't actually keep track of the status. Obviously in small companies, you're doing everything. But once you get to a bigger company, you go, you know what, we need someone who just focuses on the to-do list and making sure everyone knows what to do and it's getting done. And you have a project manager. Sometimes it's semantics, that's called a program manager. Sometimes you'll have marketing campaigns or some other campaigns, and they'll call it a program manager. But at the end of the day, the core definition for me of product management is you sit between the market, like I said here, and customer. Basically the market and the development team. So hopefully that helps clarify that. And then one point, this is just from an older talk I did, is just in the old days, it was like you build the product, and then you market it and you sell it, and it was just pretty separate. You could separate it. But on the web these days, you're selling your product like it's in the website. It's like right there. You're converting prospects to customers on your website. So it's really hard to separate the two these days. And so you got to basically figure out how to divide and conquer with marketing, and have some other stuff that talks about that, other slides that talk about that. So another way just to sum up what the job is, it's a successful product. Like at the end of the day, if you had to point at someone in the company and say, whose job is it to make sure we have a successful product? Yeah, the developers code it. Yeah, the marketers market it. But it's your job as a PM. So a lot of people will say it's a mini GM, a mini general manager, a mini CEO. In different organizations, PM are more or less empowered. Probably in an organization where they're not feeling too empowered, no one would say you're a mini CEO. They'd laugh if you said, I'm a mini CEO. Like, yeah, right, okay, yeah. Just write the specs. But in other companies where it works really well, where it's really empowered, it is more like a mini CEO, like at Intuit or other places. The other parts of it is translating those business objectives into customer needs, being a clearinghouse for all product ideas, like you're the single point of contact for all that, and you're the product expert, you're working with the team, you're defining the metrics, and you're basically helping to make sure you maximize your ROI and engineering resources. See, for me, this is all part of the job. So it's a tough job. And by the way, you don't necessarily get a lot of responsibility or authority, right? It's all through influence. I was just interviewing a candidate for one of my clients, and I was like, it's an influencing job. I'm like, yeah, it is an influencing job. One of my good friends who is a designer and product manager has the best quote. You guys know Spider-Man? His quote, with great power comes great responsibility. Right? So the product manager one is, with great responsibility comes no power. So definitely, So the good news is, in the last 10 years, product management's kind of, the importance of it and its existence as a distinct skill set and function has definitely grown a lot. In the old days, the argument was, does product management report into marketing or engineering? And these days, it's very common to see a VP of product management, on the executive team next to a VP of marketing and a VP of engineering. So, okay, so the talk, I just basically took the slides. This is a talk I gave at the product camp in Silicon Valley that Cindy mentioned, and that's in March, and it's been a long-running one. It's really, really good. It's worth the trip down there. These are free events, and I would really encourage that. The one in San Francisco, I think this will be the second time they're doing it this October. And it's good, but the one in Silicon Valley, for me, the top reason it's better is they deviate from the full-on conference format in the sense that they actually get pre-designed speakers. Like, they line speakers up in advance for the morning sessions, and then the afternoon is all kind of a la carte as people crowdsource it on a board. The advantage of that is you get some really good speakers that come in the morning, whereas if they don't know that they're going to speak, they're not going to fly out from Texas to go put their name on a whiteboard and speak. So anyway, it's good. You should go to both because they're only once a year, so they're good. But anyway, I gave a talk on being a lean product, kind of lean startup. How many people have heard of lean startup? Okay. How many people feel like they pretty much know what it is and they're pretty good at it and pretty savvy with it? How many people would like to learn more about it? How many people think it's like BS and it's like a fad? Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk about it. The way I'm going to talk about it is think of the intersection of lean startup with product management, and more specifically, what you need to do as a product manager. So that's kind of how I apply it. So what do we extract away from it? So basically, lean startup, they have this concept of product market fit, which is just basically a fancy way of saying that the customers like what you build. You validating with users. These are important points. Improving and iterating quickly. The big part of it is just you're not like in an ivory tower, heads down coding for 12 months, you launch it, and nobody likes it. We've seen plenty of examples. It's about getting feedback quickly and iterating quickly, and explicitly articulating what your hypotheses are. Like, we think if we build this, people will like it, and then actually testing them and learning from that. And at the end of the day, that's another good definition of what product management job is, product market fit, right? It goes back to that slide that I had about you're the interface point with the market. So why ninja? So the name of the talk is being a ninja. I like the term ninja just because it implies, one, you've got a high level of expertise, right, in your skill set. Secondly, that you're self-sufficient. A lot of times product management, you're like the only product manager, or there's a small team of you. Your leverage, it's like 5 to 1, 10 to 1 on engineers. So being self-sufficient is important. And then finally, that you're using a wide array. It requires using a wide array of skills. You can't just be a one-trick pony in product management. You have to learn a little bit about everything. And I was talking with someone else, and they were saying how at my company we don't have product marketing. And the implication was, and therefore balls are getting dropped. And then she basically said, and so I have to go and do some of that stuff. That's what happens. It's kind of like a gas in a vacuum. It's going to fill. A good product manager will find the important cracks that aren't being addressed by other people and grow into them. And so that ends up meaning You need to know a little bit about marketing. You need to know a little bit about wireframing, a little bit about UX, a little bit about not necessarily the expert, but enough to kind of just cover it when there's holes in the organization, I would argue. So what's the formula for product market fit? I think it's basically these 4 things. It meets customer needs. It's better than the other alternatives that are out there. It's easy to use, and it has a good price point, good value price. And so today, I can't talk about all these things. So I'm going to focus on these 2, meeting customer needs and better than the other alternatives, which are really important as a product manager to think about. And then I have other talks on ease of use where I go deeper into UX design, UI design, UX. I will say at a high level, that is definitely like, if I tell you to spend time learning an adjacent area, UX and UI would be the area I would highly recommend that you learn how to do. Because increasingly, I was talking to someone else, the person I talked to before who was working in companies 10 years ago and has been consulting since and is trying to get back in a company, they expect them to do that kind of stuff nowadays. And there isn't always a design team there. Okay, so what are the steps to achieving product market fit? So first, understand the underserved customer needs. Define your product's value proposition. Build a wireframe or mock-up. Get user feedback. Iterate. And then iterate. So I'm going to basically walk through these steps and talk about tools and practices that you can basically use. Understanding customer needs. So the biggest thing I like to use concept to illustrate this is problem space versus solution space. How many people have heard of this before? One person. Excellent. Cool. So the counterexample is a lot of times a startup, someone will just start coding something because they think it's cool. Like, look what I built. I built this thing. Now let's go find people that like and want this thing. It's kind of like you started with a solution. Whereas a problem basically is getting really clear on what's the customer problem or need or benefit that we're trying to address. Basically, in short, a product requirement. And it's in the absence of any specific implementation, right? So like, hey, I need to get from point A to point B. That's a problem space. I'm going to take a car. That's a specific solution. I'm going to take the Muni. I'm going to walk. Those are different solutions for the same customer problem, right? So a good example to illustrate this is from when the space race, they had to go, basically they're going into space, and they wanted to have pens that would work in space, and pens require gravity to work. So they realized they're not going to be able to write in space. So NASA said, okay, we've got this problem, and one of NASA's contractors spent $1 million doing R&D to develop a space pen. How many people have seen a space pen? Okay, so it's cool. You can write upside down, you can write in zero gravity. If you're in zero gravity, you can write with it, it's great. The Russian space agency, faced with the same problem, just took pencils into space. And so it's called a Russian space pen. You can actually get one of these. It's a joke. So they're kind of thumbing their nose saying, haha, you guys spent all that money. Now, there are reasons why a pen's better than a pencil and stuff like that, but it just illustrates the point by getting really clear, by constraining themselves and saying, we need a pen that writes in space, right? The pen that writes in zero gravity, versus saying we need something that writes in zero gravity. By being really clear on the problem space, it can open things up to easier solutions, higher ROI solutions and things. So let me illustrate it with a product that most people probably know. So most people probably know TurboTax and Intuit tax preparation product. That's a solution space because it's a product. If you had to ask yourself, say, what user needs does that provide or solve? It's and they compete with TaxCut. If you had to say, what are they designed to solve or provide? It's preparing your taxes, right? It's basically, this is the kind of problem space, solution space mapping. The interesting thing is when Scott Cook, the founder of Intuit, would think about the competition for TurboTax, he would not really worry as much about TaxCut. What he worried about is, you know what the top thing people are using instead of TurboTax to do their taxes? Pen and paper. That's what they're doing. That's who we're competing. We need to convert the people that are doing it the old way into doing it the new way. And so again, it helps define your competition, understand what's going on. And then the cool thing is once you start doing electronically instead of pen and paper, you can now suddenly add other benefits that you couldn't do with pen and paper, like check my taxes, file my taxes, maximize my deductions, reduce audit risk, right? So these are all just ways of getting clear on what are the benefits that your product is addressing. And then you can do it at the feature level. Basically, this is like going one level down within the TurboTax product. There's a lot of benefits we could do. You can end up clustering benefits. They're related. They're hierarchical. It's not as simple as, oh, there's one benefit or there's two benefits. They're hierarchical. And so, for example, these three benefits may support an overall goal of empowerment, making the tax person feel empowered or confident. There might be other things focused on saving their time. Like literally, it takes you less time to do it than on pen and paper. And there might be stuff about saving money, right? And there's 3 distinct buckets of benefits with sub-benefits that we're trying to divide. And then, we could come up with features that address one or more features that address these. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one mapping, but we're getting really clear on, great, here's the benefits that we're providing, and we can do a competitive analysis with other people on whether they're providing those benefits or not. Okay, so the next thing is, great, we did, yeah.
Go ahead.
So you're doing this in retrospect because that solution already exists,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking at that, and I'm seeing MRD. I always want to know what
Sure.
the values and benefits
Yeah.
are. But how do you do that when you don't have the product yet?
I'll talk about how you talk to customers. Like, yeah, it is true I'm using this product, but the point is, if you're in whatever space you're in, if you're like, hey, I'm going to build a new search engine, you need to answer these questions before you start coding, right? I mean, it's just silly to be like, we're going to kick Google's ass and start coding. It's like, you better understand how you expect to be better. And we're not even talking about the feasibility of being able to do it, but just what would it take to win against product XYZ in category A, right? Say you're going to do a travel planning site. How is it going to be better than Orbitz and Expedia? So I think even when you're starting from scratch, so again, that's in a category where they're well-defined products, but there's always some framework, some existing context, and you just talk to people. If your product's trying to innovate another area, you talk to the people that are using that, using the current alternative to it, right? So, yeah.
My linear mind, of course, loves this kind of approach.
Awesome.
And yet, isn't it true that in the real world, an awful lot of huge hit products on the internet and elsewhere really were the founder had some clever idea, and they just happen to be the lucky ones that their solution in search of a problem happened to be right? Isn't it oftentimes
It is.
all this the way?
But I would argue that they basically, hopefully, did a good job understanding what the real needs were. Like, people like to talk about Apple and all this jazz and say, like, they just do whatever and they launch and people love it. It's like, no, I think they're just, if you went in there, there'd be all kinds of awesome discussions at this level about, okay, what is our product going to do here? Now, the beauty is the customer never needs to see it. You just get the iPhone or whatever it is and you go, this is cool. And it just, So I would argue, sometimes it's luck. Yes, it's luck. And this is the problem space of it. You could totally nail this and then have a really bad product team and just blow it. You could be a genius over here and blow it. So you need both. And so I do agree with you. Sometimes it's lucky. Or it's not lucky. A lot of times in those cases, the founder or the person is the person with the problem or the use case. They're like, I'm trying to do X. There's no good product to do X. I'm going to build something that does X. And so it actually is founded in problem space. You see what I'm saying? And then they happen to do a good job on the execution. And oh, by the way, you have to do a good job on marketing to get mass adoption of it. There's a lot of things that have to come together. Sometimes there's luck involved. But I would argue that the most successful products somehow, and it may be just be luck or something, they hit the right problem space in a way that differentiated it from the competition. You know what I mean? And then I think the good news is, it's kind of like a torpedo. You don't need to shoot a torpedo like, if I'm fighting another submarine, I don't need to shoot it exactly where you're going to be. I just need to get it within a certain cone, and it'll start homing in. Same thing here. These startups and stuff, a lot of them, they pivoted early on. They didn't start out and they nailed the bullseye right away. They started in a certain direction, and then what they did is they listened to customers and they quickly iterated. Right? So as long as you kind of get it in the right product vector, and then you listen and iterate quickly, then you can suddenly be like, yeah, our product's brilliant, and we're doing what customers want. So that's how I would address that. Okay, did you have a question too?
Well, for the problem space, I don't know if you're going to touch on it, but for me it was quite a sort of a revelation to think about the vitamin versus aspirin idea. So
What'd you say? Sorry.
Vitamin versus aspirin conversation.
Oh, right.
You're solving a pain.
Yeah.
Providing a benefit.
Yeah. Yep.
For me, it was like it helped me a lot.
Sure.
In what came afterwards.
Yeah. So he's talking about basically like it's kind of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but for products, it's like, is your product so crucial that it's like water or oxygen? Or is your product like a vitamin where you don't need to take it, but it makes your life better if you do? Or is it like flowers where you don't need it at all, it's purely superfluous? It's like it's kind of how critical is your product? How important is the fundamental need? And actually, I'm going to talk about importance of needs in a sec, but it's basically that. The interesting thing I've found is that's good. I agree that's a good discussion to have. You rarely can change. The category you're in is predefined. Like when we were at Friendster, we'd have philosophical talks about this. Like, are we entertainment? Are we dating? Are we this? You know what I mean? And we would talk about, well, we're not like water. You can get, if you don't log into Friendster for a day, you're not going to die, right? So
I don't know. So I'll disagree with that.
Okay.
So I mean, maybe at a fundamental level, it's true. I mean, very feature level, I think you can like frame things up. So I mean, the saying is it's easier to get people to take a painkiller than a bite. Right? Your foot hurts, so take the painkiller. Sorry, for you. But like if you can frame up features in a clever way, you can very often create a pain point where something wasn't. So we were trying to get people to send more effective marketing. Great way to do it. Did this button. It was like based on no one would hit the button. So one thing we did was like start building KPIs and benchmarking things and showing like, hey, you're actually underperforming in a lot of areas and surfacing that information very visibly and turning it from a vitamin into a painkiller.
I agree with you. You can educate the market. If you're going to spend the dollars to educate the market, sure. But I'm saying if you don't, like there's an intrinsic, well, I'm saying there's an intrinsic anchoring. Yeah. People think of your product category as they've already decided which one it's in. And yeah, you can, that's the whole point, is to be like, I'm solving a problem you didn't even know you have, but it's a really bad problem that you like under-optimized marketing. Yeah, I agree. So that's like kind of educating the market. I agree. You can educate the market. Okay, cool. So the next thing is, say we do this awesome thinking and research, and we figure out these benefits, and there's like hundreds of benefits we could do. The next thing we need to do is we have like one developer guy we managed to hire, and he can't do all this stuff, right? So we need to figure out how do we prioritize this. And so we have to figure out what are we going to actually spend the resources on to build. And so you need to prioritize. And so then the question becomes, how do we prioritize? And so obviously the prioritization should be based on customer value. And then that begs the question, great, how do we assess customer value to prioritize it? I've seen different frameworks and different ways of doing this. And there's one pattern you see in the different frameworks that emerges that I think is consistent and is very useful. And it's importance versus satisfaction framework. So this kind of gets at what you're talking about, the importance of the user need. So how important is the user need? Like you may be in a space, like a travel, say you're in the travel site space, and you decide to launch some feature. That feature, you don't know how important that is. It may, you may internally think it's a great idea, but then you launch it and no one cares. That's an example of a low importance, basically. That addressing that need, it's not your feature. It's like, oh, the need to do whatever that feature did wasn't high. And the second part is satisfaction with how well a given product meets the need. So now we're in the solution space. So this is abstractly like how important is it for me to be able to easily find like cheap flights on dates that I want. Here's like, great, when I use Expedia, how satisfied am I and how well they meet that need? Okay, so now this basically the way we prioritize is we put importance of the user need on the y-axis from low to high. We put the user satisfaction. This is in the context of identifying a new opportunity to go after. You can also use it in the context of evaluating your features that you currently have. I'll show you this in a sec. But this is the user satisfaction with current alternatives. So say you were going to do a new search engine. You basically want to try to identify what are the user needs and what are the satisfaction with the current alternatives. And then we can divide it into 4 quadrants. The stuff that's low importance, like why would you do that, right? Why would you go after that? You'd rather go after high important stuff. So that's not really too interesting to go after. Doesn't mean people haven't done it. Some engineering-centric organizations just decide to build something they think is cool, and they go out there and realize that's not an important need for a lot of people. And I should also mention there's segmentation in this. It's not like one market for everybody. You can find markets where certain needs are more important than other ones. But we're talking about for a given well-defined segment, what we're talking about. This one, it's a high need, but there's also people are pretty satisfied with current alternatives. That's a definition of a competitive market. That's like a mature marketplace. Like I would argue kind of, the travel. It's funny because Kayak came out of nowhere and they suddenly were pretty good. But now it's kind of like it's hard to think of, or a search engine or something else. And that's a case where it's actually dominated by a main player. But everyone's pretty satisfied with it, right? It's not like people are sitting around going, Google sucks because of X. If only somebody built a search engine that had X, I would switch to it. It's, and then the last one is basically high user need, low satisfaction. And this is where there's basically an opportunity to go after. And so you can use this for evaluating markets, and you can use this for evaluating within your product all the different features. And I'll show you that in a sec. I know how many people have heard of the Kano model? Okay, a little bit more than the problem solution space. So this is another framework, like this guy, Kano, invented it. And again, it focuses on importance versus satisfaction. On that last one I didn't talk about, I'll talk about in a sec. There's a good book that does it too. So again, this is a recurring theme you see on people who are trying to think about how do we prioritize what we build and what our product should address. So on the y-axis here, it goes from user satisfaction, 100% user satisfaction, all the way down to 100% dissatisfaction, which means that they're unsatisfied with your product. And on the x-axis, it goes from how well or fully is the need met, from not met to fully met. And he basically boils everything, and this is great because he boils everything down, every benefit or feature you're building, into one of 3 categories. The first is performance. More is better. And so I'll illustrate this by using a car as an example. if you were debating between buying one car or another, and one car had higher miles per gallon than the other one, and everything else about the cars were identical, you'd pick the one with the highest miles per gallon. So miles per gallon is a performance feature, need or feature, basically, right? That's an example of that. And so more is better on those dimensions. The second category is must-haves. And so this is where, by having it or having more of it, it doesn't really make people happy. But if you don't have it, the absence of it makes people unhappy. So the analogy I would use here is seatbelts. You probably wouldn't buy a car, even if it was an awesome car, but it didn't have any seatbelts. You probably wouldn't buy it, because if you went out on the highway in an accident, you would die. That being said, the second it has one seatbelt per passenger, all of a sudden you go, you know what, we have 100 seatbelts in our car. You're not going to suddenly go, wow, it's 20 times better than the other car. So that's a must-have feature. You just basically need to provide the must-haves, but there's really no positive gains that you can get. And the third one is a delighter. And this one, the absence of this doesn't cause any problems, but the presence of it really wows people and makes them really like your product. And so the example I use here is, and actually I'm a little older, so like in the 70s, I remember when cars came out with cup holders. They didn't used to have cup holders. So imagine putting your soda or your drink down, they didn't have cup holders. And the first cars came out with cup holders, like, we have cup holders, So at that time, cup holders were a wow. And probably a few years ago, maybe GPS navigation in a car was a wow. You didn't expect it in a car, but if you had it, just kind of changed the way you got to point A and B. So these both illustrate that these things migrate over time. Things that used to be delighters, like cup holders and global nav, GPS nav, end up migrating over time. So unfortunately, the bar is constantly being raised. But what you can do is think about your product category and your product and say, great, what are the must-haves? What are the performance features? What are the delighters? And to decide and assess your competitors and decide where do you want to compete. And so that's basically, I'll get to that in a sec, but that's your value proposition. If this all sounds kind of abstract and theoretical, let me put some real data on it. This is when I was the head of product management for Quicken. We had 13 key features in the product, and we surveyed a lot of users and asked them to rate the importance, and we asked them to rate the satisfaction, and I created this plot. And so each dot on here is an actual feature, and it's a summary of all the feedback we got. And so basically, I was a product manager trying to figure out what to do for the next product, and I'm like, okay, look up here. This is awesome. Look, you rarely see this. Rarely do you see it's a 100% important feature. Like everybody in your user base agrees it's of utmost importance, and you're nailing it like 98% satisfaction. That's amazing. Like that's great. The cool thing for a product manager, I don't have to spend any engineering resources on that anymore. We're like, done. That one's good. Let's forget about that. Let me go focus on this guy where we've got people annoyed with the feature. They don't like it. And if we can move that up, we can increase the overall satisfaction of people with the product. So, yeah.
Sorry, real quick question.
Yeah.
So the satisfaction data point is based on their satisfaction with the proposed feature?
No, existing product. We're using assessment of existing product to identify opportunities to improve for the next version. That's what we're doing. Yeah, good question. And then the other thing I'd recommend, this book, What Customers Want, is awesome. And actually, Tony spoke at Product Camp 2 years ago, and it was really cool. It's a thin book, and it's funny. It doesn't have product management in the title, but when people ask me for the best product management book, that's what I recommend, because it talks about this whole thing of benefits and importance, and he has actually the most rigorous formula of importance, how to take importance, satisfaction, and create an opportunity score. It's really cool. It has like absolute value in it and stuff like that. It's not too complicated, but it makes sense. So I'd highly recommend that. But again, so he independently came up with that framework. I kind of came up with that framework. Kano came up with that framework. So it's like this importance versus satisfaction is a way to try to objectively convince someone else why we should work on this idea versus this idea. And you can get real data, as I showed. So again, the key thing here is we've got this idea of must-haves, performance, and delighters. We need to figure out, what are we going to focus on? And how are we going to be better than our competitors? And that's what your value proposition is. So say, there's you and there's two competitors, and in your category, I just kind of kept this abstract. Say there's a must-have benefit. Of course, you're all going to have that. And say there's 3 performance benefits, and these guys are good at this one, and these guys are good at this one. And you decided, hey, we're going to focus. We think there's an underserved need in this one market segment for performance benefit 3. We're going to go after that and be the leader in that. And maybe these guys have a delighter, and you've identified a delighter. You should have at least a rough sense, if not a more specific sense, of this grid for your product category as a product manager, right? And if you can't answer these questions, then it's like, why should a customer buy your product? Like, what's the value prop, and what's the pitch to them? So anyway, that's what all that stuff leads up to. is coming up with your value prop. Okay, cool. So then say, and this is kind of in the context of building a new product. Say you do all this thinking and you decide, cool, we got really clear on the benefits of problem space, and we did importance and satisfaction, and we're really clear, we're going to put a new product in this market, and we're clear on how we're going to be differentiated with our performance benefits and our delighters. The next thing to do is, great, let's go test those hypotheses. Let's go test this out. And basically, let's build some wireframes and get some feedback. Now, going back to problem space and solution space, most customers aren't good at articulating problem space to you. They're not going to say, here's my PRD, just build this. They don't do that. They're not designers. They're not product managers. They just know when I use product X, it does A, B, and C great, and I hate how it does D and E. I wish it could do G. They're not going to say a lot of that. They might just, you have to go and talk to them, and it's called eliciting requirements. You go and talk to them and get feedback on the products that they're using, right? And that's how you kind of get informed on it. But what they can do is you can give them a prototype or a mock-up or an actual product, and they'll use it, and they'll give you feedback. So anyway, that's the big thing about problem space and solution space. You need to do all this tough thinking and all this brilliance on the problem side to come up with the right solution side idea, and then that's what you can show to people to get validation and feedback that you've done the right thing. So that's why you need wireframes. And just to get specific on the terminology here, sometimes, again, this is a labeling thing where people use different labels. Wireframes typically mean low to medium fidelity visual representation of your product. Right, so we're talking about a drawing here, probably grayscale, not too much color, not too much graphics, just not pixel perfect, just enough to give people a sense of what's there. Mock-ups then are higher fidelity, kind of more picture perfect, more colors and fonts and things like that. And then a prototype tends to have some kind of interactivity that you can actually emulate the functionality, but the key point is it's not your actual product. You end up throwing it away. And so these are the tools, solution space objects that you can actually put in front of people to get their feedback. Oh, okay, cool. So on this, to get tactical, a quick survey of wireframing tools. Actually, who here are wireframes? Who does wireframes? All right. Who wishes they could do wireframes? Yeah, I sold him on that, right? Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, so for people that wireframe, who uses Visio or OmniGraffle today? Okay. Who uses PowerPoint? All right. Who uses Photoshop, Illustrator, Fireworks? High-end, heavy-end tool. Well, you do all three. You're a designer.
I do paper prototypes.
All right, cool. Who uses Balsamic? Okay, cool. Any other ones that you use that we didn't mention? Pen and paper. What's that? Envision.
Paper.
Axure. Yeah, Axure is a good one too. It'll cost.
Paper like the iPad app.
Okay, paper like the iPad app. Okay, cool. Cool. Yeah, and actually, I've used one. If we talk mobile, there's one called DAP. It's from an Australian guy. We were talking about just tech entrepreneurs in Australia. It's called DAP. It's awesome on the iPhone. So yeah, DAPP. Yeah, it's $10, but you literally create the product. As amazing as it sounds, you create it on the iPhone. You think you do it on the computer and then sync it over or something? No, you actually do it on the iPhone, but they make it easy enough to use that you can actually do it. Okay, cool. So the reason I asked that is, when they think about prototyping tools, and to the point I was talking about earlier, 10, 15 years ago in the desktop software world, if you could wireframe as a PM, it was gravy, it was bonus points, like, wow, that's kind of cool, but you didn't really have to do it. They'd expect you to produce PRDs. These days in the startup world, in the B2C startup world at least, they kind of expect you to be able to do some level of wireframing. Now, if you're lucky, your startup will have a fully dedicated designer, and then maybe you don't have to, and they're actually better at it, obviously, and quicker at it, and things like that. But in a lot of startups, they don't have a designer, and so it's helpful. I think it's very helpful, just like we were talking about how you need to show customers wireframes to get their feedback. Same thing inside the company. It's like, hey, I advocate that we build this feature. And if you talk about it in words and text, everyone's drawing a different mental picture in their mind. But the second you show a picture and they go, oh, that's what you're talking about. Oh, okay, I can get on board. I agree. Or, oh, here's why I disagree or whatever. So it's a good tool to communicate vision and get buy-in as well internally. So here we've got fidelity of prototype. And then on the lower axis is effort to create. As you guys said, pen and paper, a hand sketch. I usually start with this, because you're trying to rapidly just sketch out things, and it's the fastest thing. It's not that pretty, but it's fast. And then at the other extreme, just to call it the other extreme, is like Photoshop, Fireworks. Like you really you want to be an expert or a designer to do that, because it's kind of a complicated tool unless you learn how to use it. It's still kind of overkill. It's overkill for a lot of the lower fidelity stuff you need to do. So the big question for product managers and wireframe was always like, great, what's in the middle? What can I do? This is okay to start with, but I can't go to the CEO and go, here's my hand sketch, put this on your refrigerator. And up here, Photoshop is overkill. I'm not going to take the time and effort to do that. So what's in the middle? In the past, tools like Visio was used a lot in OmniGraffle, and they're really good for flowcharting, and they're decent for wireframing. They're not really they weren't designed as wireframing tools per se, but you can use them. The interesting thing is in recently, there's been a whole bunch of new tools that solve this middle market need of how do I just get like a medium fidelity, good enough prototype without too much work? And so Balsamiq is one of those. There's not the only one, but I highly recommend for PMs that want to get into wireframing. And if you're still using PowerPoint, Visio, OmniGraffle, you should check it out because it really does represent, for the same amount of time, you get better output. Personally, yeah.
If people use Keynote, there is actually for $20, you can get a set of widgets and things
Yep.
in Keynote to do like, especially Mac, OS X wireframing, it works pretty well.
Yeah, yeah.
And for OmniGraffle as well, they have.
Yeah, and that's what Balsamiq does too. It has a bunch of it has a widget library, so you're not creating anything from scratch. You just bring it in. But yeah, I mean, PowerPoint and Keynote are also medium fidelity prototype tools. I've used them before, but I would argue that what you're seeing now is the emergence of tools that were designed to be wireframing from scratch, and so they offer a whole new level. So I would recommend checking them out. And so the process-wise, the way this usually works, you start with hand sketch, you do a Balsamiq, and then you go to a Photoshop, and usually the PM's world ends here. Usually, it's like they don't expect you to like do bust out Photoshop and do pixel perfect stuff, but they do expect you to get it to here, and then that's where like UI designer. And if you have a full UI team, then maybe you can just do this on a whiteboard or something, and then they can take it all over from there. But it's important to talk about that handoff from PM to UI. This is an example of a wireframe, right? We're not getting detailed. It's not a lot of colors, not specific pictures. The whole point is we're trying to get clear on the information architecture and the information we're trying to convey. Yeah?
Do you find that you have to go all the way to Photoshop?
No, that's a great point. No. In fact, if you have a team, if you have a high capability team that's used to working together and used to going fast, no. And in fact, my startup, we just whiteboard to implementation directly. If everyone kind of is on the same wavelength, and they're used to working together, and they get it, and they know. Another reason might be you have a well-defined style guide already for your site. So it's like, yeah, we're building another page. No need to reinvent the wheel. Use the same kind of widgets and colors that we did before. But no, you're right. You don't have to. Yeah?
Isn't there, I'm not a project manager, but isn't there, it would seem to me there'd be a step in between hand sketching and the step before identifying the problem we want to address? There's coming up with a solution. Who's doing that? Is it the product managers coming? Or does the product manager say to your team, here team, we have this is the problem we want to solve? So
that's a great question, which is how do you bridge the gulf from problem space to solution space? And so in a mental model where I'll argue with anybody that the product manager should be the one who owns that solution space thinking, right? They need to be the one. That's their job, is to own that. It's a valid question to say, great, how do we transition from problem space to solution space? And it's tough because if you don't have a designer, so I'll tell you the full models, and I have other slides. I call it the design gap because literally design is the definition of going from problem to space. In startups, so in some startups, they don't have anybody, and so the product manager might write up a one-page doc of text and then give it to the engineer. And the poor engineer's got to figure out what the heck it's going to look like and code and things like that. And that's why you get awesome-looking UIs from those kind of situations, right? And just to be frank, let's go down. So it's kind of like this design maturity model. We go down a level. They don't even have product managers. There's no one actually doing solution-based thinking. It's just someone saying, hey, I think this would be cool, and they code it. One step up is someone's doing solution-based thinking, but no one's doing design. One step up from that is you actually have a designer to do it. So the reality is, if you're in a kind of fully cross-functional situation where you have a PM and a UI designer, and by the way, within UI design, you have interaction designers and visual designers. There's two different specialties. There's really three if we want to talk about information architecture, but we can just lump in interaction design for simplicity. Then there's the engineers. Ideally, you have all those, like the best kind of recipes come when you have all those people there. The reality is a lot of startup situations, those aren't all there. And so in those situations, the choices are the engineer just does it, or the PM leans in and helps cover that gap by doing some hand sketches. Or they do it collaboratively. They get in a room on a whiteboard and say, we could do it this way. Or they go and they say, Path has a good UI for what we're trying to do. Let's go look at that. They go and they imitate they go and look at other people, and they just copy and paste from other people. So, but it's true. That's the definition of design. That's the definition of innovation. Combined with getting really clear on the problem space, coming up with an innovative solution that meets those needs. That's what it is. So, unfortunately, there are lots of situations where the PM can't just stop at the problem definition. Unfortunately. So. And I would say at a minimum, you should be intertwined with the solution stuff to make sure that what the other person's coming up with meets the needs, how you verify it meets the solutions. So the solutions meet the needs. So that's a wireframe. Okay, cool. So I would advocate that in today's world, if you want to be a competitive product manager in the web or mobile space, you should be able to wireframe. May not love doing it, but you should be able to do it. Mainly because you won't often have a UX designer. Now, if you're in a big company and you're like, Dan, what are you talking about? We got a 30-person UX team? Fine, then ignore what I'm saying. I'm talking about more startup world, where it's just not really like that as much. And I think still it's valuable to communicate your ideas, right? You may do your wireframes, and then the designer say, thanks, I'm going to start from scratch. That's fine. At least they know what you kind of had in mind. It definitely helps clarify and refine your thinking. The times when you write up a PRD that's in text, or you're putting in tickets or stories in Tracker or Jira or whatever, the difference between that small amount of text and then saying, what would that actually look like on a screen? You'll find that you end up finding all kinds of things you didn't think about, things that are in conflict with what your own saying, I need to do X and Y, but I don't see how I can do that on the same screen. It just really helps move the progress along to a real product. Communicating to other people's, and the good news is modern tools make it easy. So I'm going to go further and advocate Balsamiq. I don't get paid by those guys, but just I've seen it emerge and provide this new kind of efficient point of medium fidelity prototyping. Their widget library has a bunch of stuff. You can annotate it. So it has all the other stuff too. You can annotate it with sticky notes. You can say, hey, when they click this, it goes here. Or, hey, don't forget if you're logged out, it looks like this. You can kind of annotate it, which is really important. You can also add click navigation. This is really cool. So this is like a really easy, quick way to build like a little story, an interactive story. You can give a demo to a customer. And you basically do a wireframe and you say, okay, you click here. And they actually click there and it goes to the right screen, right? So lightweight kind of interaction. Another important thing is you can export it as a PDF. So other people don't need Balsamiq to look at your stuff you create. And if it's multiple screens, multiple pages, it all puts it in one PDF and you can navigate. It's pretty cool. And it's like $79. And if you have a discount code, it's even less. So end of sales pitch, but check it out if you're not using it. Huh? No, I don't know. I have a 50% off. If you Google, you can find a 50% off coupon code. That's what I found, but that's the best I could do.
There's a bunch of new wireframe tools that are coming out. The name escapes me, but I've checked it out, where they integrate the wireframing with the sharing it with user and getting feedback.
Yeah.
So it's like taking the wireframing and usertesting.com.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Real-time validation.
Yep.
Does it suck or
Yep.
not?
Yep. That makes sense, and that's what I'm trying to say is the efficient frontier has moved. If you're still using OmniGraffle and these other things, it's moved, and it's moving even more, as you can see. It's just so the point is, check your tool set and see what's out there. Okay, so then great, we've figured out problem space. To your point, somehow we've managed to bridge the gulf of design and get to a specific wireframe. We're ready to go get some user feedback and validate it. So how do we do that? And actually, what are we going to do? What are we going to get feedback about? So the problem space is, again, your set of assumptions, and hypotheses, and mental model, and the solution space is what they can react to. So you're basically learning, about customer understanding. You're gaining customer understanding about what their needs are. You thought their needs were this. You thought their preferences were this. You're going to go out and validate that. In the solution space, you're tactically getting feedback on your feature set. Like you built X, Y, and Z, and you didn't build, A, B, and C. And you may go out there and they go, hey, where's A? How can you be a trip site without A? And they go, okay, you have a hole in your feature set. You're getting feedback on your UI design. Not all travel sites are the same. Some have cool, people do innovate. This is an area of innovation. People come up with cool new UI tools like the comparison grid. It's funny on travel sites. Like the first travel site had the grid where you could see, buy carrier, buy this, the price. And then now guess what? They all have it. They all copied it. But you're getting feedback on your UI design. And you're also getting feedback on the messaging you use. You could have done a great job on the problem space definition, a great job on your wireframes, and your product is easy to use. But just the way you talk about it doesn't resonate with people. And there's an interesting thing. So we were talking about pragmatic marketing. How many people have taken a pragmatic marketing class? 3. Okay, so pragmatic marketing is an outfit that's been doing PM training for a long time. They were the first kids on the block doing it a long time ago. I took 2 of their classes. They have an interesting thing to highlight this point is they call, how appealing would it be to eat dead chicken parts? Would you be excited about eating that? And so he uses that like Kentucky Fried Chicken versus dead chicken parts. That's what it's interesting. It's just messaging kind of, or like how you talk about a given feature, or what points you message, basically, how you message the benefit. So anyway, these are a simple framework way to think. I'm getting feedback on these 3 things when I put something in front of somebody. And you can get learnings in each of those areas. Okay, so how do we actually do it? I like to call this, again, I focus on startups, so I call it ramen user feedback because there's no frills. The first thing is A lot of people think, oh, you need a usability. I need a usability person. I can't do this. I need a usability person. I need someone who knows this, who's an expert. That's baloney. There's no reason anybody can't do it. Yeah, they might do a little better. They may be more polished or have more experience, but there's no reason anybody can do it. I worked at Intuit, where they're a big pioneer and innovator in usability. They have usability labs with one-way mirrors and cameras out the wazoo and all this. That's great, but I mean, I've done tons of usability where it's just me sitting here with a laptop and the person's right there, and you just do it.
You guys kind of pioneered the follow me.
And the follow me home stuff too. Yeah, so a lot of user-centric kind of stuff. Yeah. So basically, what do you need? You just basically need that mock-up or some alpha product or something to test. You need a customer. I personally think if you're going to be testing working code, have them bring their laptop so they don't get tripped up on whatever hardware you've got. They can use their hardware and their browser, and that gets out of the way. You just need a desk. You need a person to conduct it. You need something for notes. And optionally, there's a separate note taker because it can be challenging if you haven't done a lot of usability, moderated a lot. It can be challenging to try to run this and keep track of this and keep notes. Once you get good at it, you can do both, or you just record it, although no one ever watches the video recordings, especially the engineers that were supposed to be there. So don't fall for that trick. Don't fall for that trick. If we're doing usability and the engineering manager or somebody says, yeah, videotape it, and we'll just watch it, don't fall for that trick. Make them go in person, because nobody ever watches the videotapes. Not even the PMs watch the videotapes. And you have to pay more for the video. That's how they get you. Okay, typical format. So what do we actually ask? So I like to spend 5 or 10 minutes asking them, before I even show them the mock-up, just asking them kind of things that get at the problem space. Hey, what are you using today? How do you like it? What does it do for you? Just understanding their needs just by talking about it and having them talk about the products that they use. Then I show them the mock-up. The key thing here is I want to be as non-directed as possible. I don't want to lead the witness at all. When necessary, I'll direct them to keep them on task or where I want to get feedback. But in general, I want to be non-directed. And I spend usually about 30 to 50 minutes on that. And then at the end, 5 to 10 minutes where we answer any questions and we point out things that they may not have organically seen. And at the end, the other thing that's really important is asking if they would use the product. Because I did several usability sessions. When I did your version, I did 80 one-on-one usability sessions before we launched. And I think that's part of why we won the People's Choice Award, because we spent so much time getting user feedback. And the first few times, I was just doing feedback, and somebody, it seemed to be going really well. After we kind of fixed the usability issues, it seemed to be going pretty well. And then I decided to start asking, would you use it? And one person was like, no, I wouldn't use it. Like, it would have gone, the usability session had gone really well. Like, they didn't run into any issues, but they're like, no, I wouldn't use it. I'm like, why? Like, well, I like to get my news this way. So it's just good. It helps to start build your mental model, too, of like, would they actually use this or not? So it's not just about usability. It's also about product market fit. So some do's and don'ts. So do explain to them, sometimes people are self-conscious, like I don't want to say anything bad because you're the founder, you're the coder, you're the PM, and this is your product, and I don't want to make you feel bad. You need to defer that by basically saying, hey, your feedback, we want to get your feedback. You're going to help us make it better. So the more honest you are, the better. Don't worry about hearing our feelings. And the other thing is some people are kind of reserved or don't like to speak up much, and so you don't get a lot of good data when you do a usability session if there's someone who doesn't really express a lot what they're thinking as they're going through it. So we encourage this by what's called the Think Aloud protocol. It's basically encourage the person to, hey, as you're thinking of things, just say what's on your mind as you're going through it. Then basically, when you're trying to get feedback, whatever task you're trying to get feedback on, ask them to do it and then just like disappear, like just be a fly on the wall. And a lot of times, I remember I'll just put them on like the home page and just sit there, and there'd be awkward silence. And some people just jump right in. Other people like, do you want me to sign up? And I'm just be like, do whatever you would do when you're at home. Like just do, like you don't want to like guide them through it. You just want to let them do it. When you ask questions, make sure they're open-ended, non-leading questions. Not like, that was easy, wasn't it? That's great, isn't it? Or, don't ask yes or no questions. Ask, kind of open-ended questions like why and how questions. Take notes and review them. Don't ask leading questions to cover that. The other thing is don't help them or explain the UI. Like if you're trying to see if they can log in and you see them struggling, you don't go, oh, yeah, just go over here and log in. Like the whole point is to see the pain that and it can be tough to watch sometimes people not being able to figure out this thing that you think is super easy to use and why can't they figure it out. But the whole point is you need to see that. The other thing is if they're frustrated or they're asking questions, this is the toughest thing. They'll ask you questions. I just basically look, pretend you're at home by yourself. I'm happy to answer your questions when we're done with usability, and I will in that final 10-minute section. Definitely don't get defensive. I've seen a lot of companies do this, where it's like, oh, you just click over here. Don't you see? Like, come on. Or blame the user. I've seen people blame the user, too. Obviously, something's wrong with your product. If they can't figure it out, it's not their fault. Okay, so you basically, that's how you get the feedback, and you get all these learnings, and then you basically want to iterate your wireframes based on this feedback. Yeah?
How do you get people? And
Mm.
if you're like in ramen profitability,
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of money, you
Yeah.
don't want to shell out like
Sure.
100 gift cards.
Sure. Okay. Top way you do it is private beta, and that's the price of admission. That's what I did for your version. It's like, private. You want to be in our private beta? Come to usability. Other things you can do, I've done this once, and I think it's really cool. We call it Starbucks usability. You just bring your laptop or whatever, and you just go into Starbucks. You know people at Starbucks aren't really there to do work. They're there to, like, you know, yeah, you're trying to, maybe if you have 5 roommates, you're trying to get away from it all. And you don't want to bug people. But basically, you can go El Cheapo and just say, hey, can I have 5 minutes of your time? Or you can buy little gift cards, like give them a little $5 coffee card for, hey, for your time. So that's one way to do it.
Doesn't that become a bias? You were saying
Caffeinated people, yeah, they might be a little hopped up when they're, no.
I don't know. Like,
I mean, it just depends what you're trying to do. So there's 2 parts to this, right? Let's just be clear. There's basic human usability, which is like you just get a human who uses a computer and a browser. And honestly, for the first couple of times, you want to just get that out of the way sometimes. Then there's, to what extent are they in my target market, right? So the problem with doing Starbucks usability is someone say, I would never use that site. And you change your mind, you take that. But what you really, if you do Starbucks usability, it's to get feedback on, did you understand the message? Yeah, you may not be interested in this benefit, but did you understand what it was? Can you echo it back? So another interesting usability test is you take a landing page. You guys know what a landing page is, right? It's a page that just tries to convey your value proposition and get them to go to the next part and sign up or whatever. An interesting thing you can do is and this is just paper, you can do it, there's no reason to code it. Just do it in Photoshop. You put it down there for 5 seconds and you take it away and you go, what did you remember from that page? Like that's the kind of level of what you're trying to get from Starbucks. Now, if you are building a general purpose consumer product, which a lot of people are, then it's also valid potentially with product market fit. You can ask them some basic questions. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm building a travel site. For whatever reason, I talked to the one guy who never flies on planes. I'm going to ignore his feedback about product market fit, but I'm going to take his feedback about usability, right? Now, so the more specific your segment, like my wife's a doctor. If you're bringing a medical product, those guys are busy. It's hard to get a hold of them. So there is a legitimate question if you have a really specific niche product. But I think you can get basic usability feedback from almost anybody.
And also, always doing something is better than doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let that stop you.
Exactly.
We've had a lot of problems talking to businesses.
Yeah.
Because I've got a 2-sided market product.
Sure.
So
That's tough.
Talking to users has been alright.
Yeah.
Getting hold of businesses has been really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, so there's, worst case, if you have budget, you can do Craigslist. So I've done other things. So I've done Craigslist that then goes to like a SurveyMonkey or Zoomerang thing to qualify people. So then it's like you're not just getting 20 random people and only 5 are in your target market. You do a survey, and you basically, they'd be willing. Most people are willing to do it. If it's businesses, maybe you just have to go door to door. The other thing is start with your network of who you know. You always have to have like 10 or 20 friends, or even at this event like this. Just say, hey, yeah, okay, cool.
I actually have a solution to both of those problems here. First one, we ran a lot of focus groups, asked our professors to pass the information and the questionnaire to the class, just 10 minutes before.
Yeah.
Free, you've got, some college kids talking about it and giving feedback, that helps. And the second one is we have a double-sided product, we go business to business and business to consumer. And knocking on businesses and reaching them was tough, they're not really interested. And that's when the vertical integration comes in. If you can't, beat them, join them, or if you can't join them, find somebody who helps them. So if you're trying to reach 10 businesses, they already are in, working with somebody that supplies to them, talks to them, so reach them, and they can supply your product down to the rest of the chain. And at that point, they'll probably want to use your product if they see any benefits to it, and further push the product to those 10, 15 businesses that you're trying to reach. And that has been working out very well for us. getting our product out, rather than knocking on door to door.
Yeah, and someone mentioned user testing. There increasingly are these sites online that have panels. And I've also done panels. You got to pay the people, but there's panels. You can run them through a screener, and basically. So there are, to meet this need, there are like companies that have panels of people waiting to do kind of user feedback stuff. Yeah. But you do have to pay them.
Remote user testing like Athenea, if you've got an existing product, you can have it show up for every 100 users. They go through a screener, and
right.
You can connect on the phone.
Right.
And
Cool.
Sorry, the last one. When do you know it's enough feedback? Sorry.
No, it's interesting. So you'll see the patterns. The thing is, the interesting thing about in the early days, usability feedback. When it's usability, people get tripped up, say, on your registration page. So you do 10 people and like 8 just got confused or somehow got tripped up on your registration page. So you go back to your team and you fix it. And you do the next 10 people, they don't get tripped up on the registration page. They don't know what the old page used to look like. They don't go, good job, Dan. They don't know. So it's funny because you make usability progress is measured by the absence of the objections or issues you had before. On the product market fit front, I mean, you can basically do a quantitative version of that question of, would you use this product? And so there's a survey a tool out there called Survey.io where it asks, it's more for once you're in market, but it kind of asks you like, how would you feel if you could no longer use this product? So you just kind of try to quantify that product market fit by asking people. Okay, I gotta pick up the pace and blow through the rest of this. I'm happy to ask questions at the end. So we're going to iterate based on our user feedback. So say we started, say we were debating early on. This is what I call the product vector. I kind of talked about this a little bit with the torpedo, but picking what are we going to do? Okay, say we're going to do planning travel, and that's the vector we headed off in, right? And so we build a little wireframe or prototype, and then we go off and we get feedback, and then they tell us, hey, you know what? Here's our feedback. And then we course correct, and we just kind of go back and forth, right? And so that's what we're really doing. That's how you're learning from customers, is you're basically going out, getting feedback, going back, iterating based on what you learned, going back. And hopefully the concerns and objections are getting smaller and going away, and the nods and the positives and the yes, I'm doing this is getting stronger and stronger, basically, as measured by degree with each person, as well as percentage of people that are responding positively versus negatively. Okay, real quick case study. I'm going to have to go over 5 minutes if that's okay, just because this case study helps tie it all together. Is that okay? Okay, cool. All right. Just because this actually, I'm talking a lot of theoretical and construct. This is a project I actually did for a client where we did this in practice, and it worked like a charm, and this was in 2006 before Lean Startup was like a term. So it basically was MarketingReport.com, and my client was Trusted ID, and basically there was a CEO there. They didn't really have any product management people. He was a smart CEO, more of a biz dev kind of strategy guy. And he had an idea for a new product, and he wanted me to come in and kind of validate it. And he hired also a UI design consultant to help out, and basically his head of marketing was involved. So it was the 4 of us were really the team. The goal was to validate the product market fit without writing a single line of code and determine if there was a real opportunity worth pursuing or not. So I went in, and honestly it was a little fuzzy. It was kind of like the CEO had an idea of what it was. The head of marketing had a different idea. The core concept was it's just like you have a credit report. There's basically all this data behind the scenes on you that you can get a copy of with a credit report. The idea was same thing with marketers. Why are we getting all this junk mail? Why did they decide to send me this? Like there's some database back there of marketing data, and can't we do the same thing by making it transparent and empowering people with a marketing report? That was the core idea. But it was fuzzy, and the 2 people had different ideas, so I decided instead of trying to have one size fits all, I said, this is really 2 different concepts. They're related, but let me break this up. One is Marketing Shield, where basically it's going to help you stop getting junk mail, like not getting the unwanted marketing mail. And then the other one was Marketing Saver. The whole point of both of these was to increase relevance, either by reducing the irrelevant stuff or being able on the Marketing Saver front to say, hey, I'm interested in XYZ. Don't send me stuff on cat litter. I don't have a cat. I'm interested in XYZ. Send me stuff on XYZ. That was Marketing Saver. And basically, the way we kind of did this is there were different modules for each of these. Some of the modules were common, like the Marketing Report module was common. And then I basically defined this, and I worked with the designer who created paper mock-ups, again, no coding at all, like 5 pages each for a mini site of what these would be. So here's an example. This was a landing page for MarketingReport.com. Again, no code. This is not even super high fidelity. There's no like fancy graphics here or anything. But this is enough to get user feedback. And again, at this point, mainly on messaging, right? Really people understanding benefits and how we're talking about them. And then as far as, well, what do you mean by modules or how do you test it? This is kind of what we would test. You'd be on the landing page, and then you'd come into a home page. This was the Marketing Shield concept. So all we did is we swapped out a couple of these modules for the 2 different concepts. and like the marketing profile and the marketing score was on both of them. So the first thing I did is to define the problem space. I went in there and I was like, okay, great, what are we talking about? What's the real core of what these things are? And so I did that by talking to them and clustering them. And basically there was one cluster, the core cluster was find out what the marketing database people know about you. And that translated into a marketing report, a marketing score, and a marketing profile. Then there was all these other things related to the saver concept about saving you money, comparing yourself to others. I'm spending on this. I'm spending this much. Is that okay or not? And social networking was hot at the time, so kind of social networking stuff. And then the distinct other cluster was reduced junk mail, and secondarily benefit of save trees that we could potentially offer. So this was the common core. So this is what became the shield concept. And this is what became the saver concept. And so the modules for the marketing report and marketing score were in both of them. And then we swapped out different ones for junk mail versus these other ones. As far as recruiting people, how we did it, we did have a budget, fortunately. I wrote a phone screen questionnaire, and we worked with an outfit here that had a panel. I made sure that they work full-time, they use the internet. All we did for kind of getting people in the right segments was for the saver one, we said, hey, maybe if they use coupons or they have a Costco membership, they're more focused on saving money. So that's qualifying criteria. For anti-junk mail, we just said, hey, they probably use a paper shredder, or they probably block caller ID, stuff like that. We scheduled 3 groups of 2 or 3 people, and we talked to them for 90 minutes. I moderated and ran them through the paper prototypes. And here's what we found. Red means they didn't like it that much. Green means they liked it. Yellow is they were lukewarm. And so we found that, for the Shield people, they really liked this, really resonated. The core aspect of Shield resonated with them. On the savers, they did like the money saving, but they didn't go for the other stuff. The other interesting thing is this marketing score, which wasn't super well defined and fuzzy, they didn't like. And this actually, if you think about the engineering effort and resources, they would have had to gone out and got some third-party data and tons of coding. So not only is it cool that we learn what people want, we learn what people don't want, so we don't have to spend any resources or time on that other stuff. So we strip away the fat, too, that isn't value add. So we learned that Shield was stronger than Saver. People didn't like a lot of the Saver concepts. Even within the Shield concept, it wasn't like they were sold. They had a lot of questions. A lot of things weren't clear. And so basically, we refined it. At that point, the CEO was like, this is great, Dan. Thanks a lot. Good learnings. I'm like, hey, can we take our learnings and just do one iteration and get new feedback again? And so he let us do it. So we took the Shield concept. We took out the stuff that didn't matter. We improved the messaging. We had a list of all the concerns that people had, so it wasn't rocket science. And we did it again. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen because we ran it, and it was nothing but head nodding. There were no major concerns or issues, just people nodding. At the end of it, they're like, how much is this? $10? When is it coming out? Can I sign up? That's how you see. I saw it in one iteration, the progress that we made. It was really cool. Clear willingness to pay. And so here's what we pivoted to. It was junk mail freeze. Totally pivoted from Marketing Report. And all these things have been kind of vetted, and this was words. We kind of already got the first set of words out there, messaging that people kind of had problems with or confused about when we iterated. So it was really cool. So in summary, it was and this only took 4 weeks from the first meeting till we did it. 0 coding. We did pay people $75 each, so it cost $1,500. And we did, basically identified a concept that was cool. But more importantly, I think the coolest thing is we trimmed away stuff that people aren't going to want. We don't have to spend any resources. And it's not like we did anything that was rocket science. Most people can achieve those same results. You asked me, how do you know? So I won't go into too much detail, but there's surveys. You can do surveys. You can do Net Promoter, Survey.io. When you have an actual product, there are metrics that you can use, high conversion rate, things like that.
Do you have a rough number for amount of answers and conversion rate?
Well, they'll say on this one, they'll say 40%, very disappointed. This one, there's a data set where they actually say, you should check it out, because the guy, Sean Ellis, he's a really sharp guy. He's done enough of these that he has kind of thresholds based on what industry you're in and things like that. And then the whole point is you want to optimize through iteration, basically looking at we didn't talk too much about metrics, but you want to get metrics, analyze them. And the whole point is to iterate and to learn as you go through this, right? Okay, that's it. So basically, to sum up, you want to understand the problem space, to identify those underserved needs, define your value prop, create the wireframes, get the feedback, revise those 3 components, feature set, UI design, and messaging, and launch, learn, and iterate. So that's it. So cool. So I'm happy to answer any other questions anybody wants.
What do you think? Steve Jobs doesn't believe in this. Steve Jobs.
He does. They actually do
Yeah. So what they do.
So it's a myth then.
No, well, let me tease it apart for you, because this comes up a lot, and we almost got to this point when someone asked before. I thought that's what you were going to ask, is this point. And there's models of innovation that talk about like the degree of innovation and incremental innovation versus disruptive innovation. And so the classic counterexample is people will say, yeah, but like someone you said earlier, like one guy gets lucky or has a good idea, or Steve Jobs just does what he wants and he knows what people want, or the ATM. The classical example is the ATM. They actually did a lot of focus groups and research before the ATMs came out, and no one said they wanted it. It just failed. If they had gone off their market research, they wouldn't have done it. But they did it. And the key point is, to me, that reinforces the problem space, solution space concept. Until there was a real live ATM out there and people could see how you use it and say, oh, wow, this really is more convenient. They couldn't imagine. It was so different. It was disruptive innovation. It was so far away from what they knew that you couldn't get good feedback, because they don't know what it looks like yet. Like, so if there was some way to magically be like, here, let's teleport you to this other country that has ATMs. Go check it out and live here for a year. Then they would go, oh, I get it. Okay, cool. So the key thing is, when you're doing disruptive innovation, it may be challenging to get good product market fit feedback, because the people just like apples and oranges, they can't really relate the two. So what people that do disruptive innovation, they still are very clear on the problem space. Like Steve Jobs knew exactly how the iPhone was going to be. I bet you they did all the benefits and the value prop, and they thought about, they didn't necessarily publicize, they didn't publicize it, they don't publicize anything to anybody, but they definitely thought about, how is this phone going to be disruptive innovation in the phone space? And they thought about all those things. You know, I believe that they did. Yeah, and they actually, they build a bunch of, exactly, they don't just build one iPhone, they build a bunch of different ones, and they iterate, and they test it, and they give it to people. Like that one that got caught in the bar, right? The one that was in the bar, it's because they gave it to some employees to go and test and do stuff. So anybody, most people will use the counterexample, and the point is, when there's disruptive innovation, yes, it's true, you may not get good feedback in the solution from people, from customers, because they can't, just like apples and oranges. It doesn't mean, the conclusion is not, therefore, don't do any problem-space thinking, or the people that succeed in disruptive innovation don't do that or don't need to do that. That's the part where we get into trouble, I think. So hopefully that reconciles it. Any other questions? Yeah.
That's kind of a big topic, but do you have any concise advice about metrics and sort of what to track or?
Yeah. Yeah, and actually in other talks I do a whole thing about the equation of your business. Being a quantitative guy, you can actually quantify the success of your business, and it's easy to track those metrics. And so what you end up doing is you end up tracking active users. So like people always, a lot of times you see a startup bragging about how many registered users they have. Hey, we have 100 million registered users. The real question is, great, how many people actually used it in the last month? Active users. So the first thing is, yeah, you want to track registered users, but active users is more important. Active users consist of two parts, new users and returning users. So if you're only tracking active users and you get covered on TechCrunch, you're going to have a huge spike and you go, yay, your product didn't get any better. You just got a bunch of new users. So really, returning users is what's more important. And so you just basically need to get your metric system so you can track the difference between a returning user and a new user, and then you'll really know what's going on. And that retention, that you can express it as a retention rate, to me, that's the ultimate measure of that product market fit. If you're retaining users, another analogy people use is a bucket. If your product is a bucket and you're pouring users into it and they're just all leaking out because it's not resonating with people, they don't come back to use it again, your retention isn't good. So most people generally agree you want to basically work on your product, iterate until your retention is really good before you start spending too much money on acquisition and sending people to that leaky bucket. You'd rather send them to a bucket that isn't leaking as much. So personally, if I had to pick one thing, it would be returning users. That should be going up and to the right if you're doing things right. Yeah?
I was just wondering, what applies in this practice when we're not talking about kind of a new product?
Yes.
We're talking about going to like an entrenched company with an old product,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like revamping it.
So remember that graph I put up with the 13 data points of importance and satisfaction? Quicken had been around for over 18 years. It was a mature product. So you can use it to assess your current product. So I would say a starting point would be survey your current users, figure out some way to break down your product into different areas that you can solicit feedback on, ask them, how important is this? How often do you use this? Hopefully you've got data on which parts they use, because usage is the ultimate. Instead of people telling you what they do, if you see usage, you can see, hey, we've got 10 parts of the site, but no one ever uses a certain part. Why is that? So you can figure out why, and maybe you either decide to cut it, or you decide, no, it's core, we're just underperforming, we need to fix that. So I think if you're in a mature product category, it's easy because you have users to talk to. You don't have the problem he has. You have your current users. And then you can figure out what they want. And then the other thing is you can start to look at adjacent product market needs, like adjacent market needs. That's the typical growth strategy for someone who's in a mature product category.
On the methods things, I don't know, I think a couple of things might be useful. Cohort analysis, I find to be pretty useful, which is kind of the return thing that you were talking about, returning users. So you basically account for the fact that people start in the second week are not in the same bucket with people who started on the first week, because they've only been with the product for 1 week. So they have to put it on the profile. And there's some interesting metrics. Dave McClure has got metrics for parents. That is a very good set of
one of my sites is me and Dave doing a panel on how to be a product metrics Jedi, if you want to check it out. But basically what you're talking about is a retention rate, where you basically measure like days since sign up, and there's a drop-off curve like this. That's a cohort. And so you say, okay, all the people started on a given day. But what you want to do over time is you want to move that curve up, right? You're basically keeping people around longer, right? That's how you basically measure it. This is percentage, kind of percentage of people that are still active that signed up. That's cohort analysis, basically. So you can do it. It's great if you can do it. The lightweight thing is just returning users because it's easier to track and you can just kind of see. And then, if there's some way the other way to do it is to express this as a percentage. You say, okay, great, what percent of people that signed up in the last 30 days have been back again? And then it's a percentage that you can track over time. A big part of the problem with metrics is you usually want to track percentage metrics so you can compare it over time, apples to apples. If you're just tracking returning users, or say new users, and all of a sudden you get a spike from TechCrunch, it's like all of a sudden your graphs are going to be out. But if you're doing like a percentage kind of thing, like a registration conversion rate percentage, then it'll still be, you can compare despite those spikes and events. Yeah?
So sometimes your business goal is like 1 million users active or $10,000 a day or something like that. And to allude to the metrics there, sometimes the metrics are good to figure out what to do, but, or you decide on some metrics and you build features to those metrics. Are there any other good frameworks for going from some very abstract business goal to what am I going to do next that you could suggest?
I mean, it's tough. I mean, in that case, so there's usually it breaks down into acquisition, so like new user numbers. And I think the best way to make informed goals is to have benchmark. You can see, hey, we're currently at this many users. We're currently adding this many, per day. Basically like on a graph, it's like, okay, like we're here today with this many users and we're growing at this rate, and here's the goal next year. The CEO wants to be here, and we're going to end up here. Like I think first and foremost, you need to have the numbers to know that, wow, this is the gap that we need to make up, and then you can start a discussion about how do we close that gap. And if it's acquisition, then it's things like SEM and advertising, and it takes money and things like that. If it's revenue, then it's again back to users or some idea of changing your revenue mix, among products, or coming up with a higher price product or something like that. So I think it has to start with that, so people know the gap. And even your forecast may not be perfect, but at least you know how big a gap. Because a lot of times those goals get set in a vacuum, and they're not attainable, and then everyone gets bummed out.
What you've been doing is basically what Lean Startup concept is all about. So, so basically, looks like you're a subscriber.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What do you tell the distracted?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to argue. Like, what's a better model? Like, all this is basically saying is, be explicit about your hypotheses, test them with users, learn and iterate. Like, that's who can argue with that, right?
Is this any different or distinct from agile development?
So agile development doesn't have anything to do with customers or anything like that per se. Agile development is a development methodology that is a contrast to waterfall. Waterfall was basically is like the sequential thing where you like the idea is you kind of like try to gather all your requirements up front and write a big doc and try to design it all up front and then build it. Agile kind of flips it on its head, and what would happen is a lot of these big scope project and big companies would never ship on time, right? And it was just like, it'd be like, okay, we're going to code this for a year, and it would literally slip for a year, like 100% slippage. And so Agile is just, I view it as mainly as an antidote for that, which is, you know what? We're just going to ship something each week or each month. We don't care. Like it starts with that kind of mentality of we're just going to get a process in place where we ship something each short period of time, called sprint or whatever. And that's what it comes down to. That's what it really does. It's just a focus on, in my mind, a focus on launching stuff frequently. And then the key then is you kind of let go of this idea of we need to know all the requirements up front. All we need to know is have enough of visibility into the future to plan out the next sprint or two. And then we know that things are going to change. And the other point that's common with this, the one thing that isn't common is get the product out there, because if you get it out sooner, if you can get what we call a minimally viable product, instead of having like super scope thing, you get a minimally viable product out, you'll start to get feedback, right? And that's the whole point of this is get a product in market. Now, wireframes are good. They're better than no feedback. But getting a product in market is even more robust feedback because then people are actually using it or not saying whether they're going to use it or not. And so the point is if you can get the product in market sooner, you'll start getting the learning sooner. You'll figure out what's really important, which things you can trim. So that's the idea. And so what Lean Startup really did is actually it took the idea of agile development, and even beyond that is this concept of continuous integration, and combined it with Steve Blank's framework of customer development, which is kind of a lot of what we're talking about here is just getting clear on what benefits you're providing, validating with users, making sure they're actually going to buy it before you spend too many resources on it. So Lean Startup kind of integrated agile with the kind of product management side of it, if you will. And in general, agile, they try to, when you write your stories, you try to write them from a user-centric point of view. So in that sense, it's kind of consistent as well.
What do you think of the business model around this?
I think it's cool. I mean, I view it as like a framework. It's basically just a checklist. So it's more like, did you think about these 9 areas, right? So it's just a way to think through 9 areas. So